welcome to The Book Was Better, where we're watching today's movies one book at a time. Here's a question for you. If you got to take the powers of any mutant from the X-Men, who would it be? Would you pick Skin, the man with extra stretchy skin flaps? Beak, who had the power of being a hideous bird monster? Choir, the multi-ventriloquist lady with mouths all over her neck? Oh god, porn of her would be horrifying. Or one of the worst of them all, Jubilee, the human sparkler. For those of you who said Nightcrawler, congratulations! You found the obvious link in my opening stupid joke. Jumper was written in 1992 by Stephen Charles Gould, not to be confused with evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould, because I'm sure those two get confused all the time. The Jumper series is about David Rice, who discovers one day that he has the unique ability to teleport. Being young when he left his abusive father, he had to make several morally great choices, like whether or not he should rob banks to pay for an apartment. The book, and several of Gould's other books, also has a heavy focus on combating government corruption, demonstrated when the NSA illegally abducted David's girlfriend Millie in order to lure him out. The book has a slow pace, but knows how to keep a reader invested page after page. Plus, you might be interested to hear that this turned into a multi-book series, which I may get around to reading someday. The movie decided to go the other direction, relying on special effects and neat but hollow ideas in order to tell the story. The movie came out in 2008 but was a critical failure. While it did make a healthy profit, people spent too much time pointing out the plot holes or small details that went wrong within the story. And if you want loyalty to the source material, forget it! Fans of the book might as well quit after the first 20 minutes because the movie completely jumps the rails from what the book set in place. So where did the movie go wrong? Well, let's find out for ourselves as we jump into Jumper. The movie starts out by giving us David's backstory, briefly imitating the book's first-person perspective.
It wasn't always like this. Once I was a normal person. A chump, just like you.
Fuck you, blow me.
David is the awkward, shy kid in class, so you know he has a good heart, is very compassionate, and will probably grow up to do something great, like hosting a review show on YouTube. Young David also has a crush on his friend Millie. He buys a snow globe for her, but the schoolyard bully chucks it into the middle of a frozen river. David, being stubborn, goes to get it.
All good, see?
Great, come back.
It looks like David is going to drown when suddenly, and for no discernible reason, he teleports. And he splashes down in the county library, ruining dozens of books. Okay. The book explained that this was an instinctively safe place for David in his youth, so I'll let this slide for now, but you're on thin ice! Thin ice. David walks home late to his alcoholic father, played by Michael Rooker.
You're late. Supper's cold. Where you been, anyway? You know, when I ask a question, I expect an answer, okay?
Is this guy just typecast to be an abusive father figure?
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
David's mother left when he was just 5, and David's father had no one else to take out his aggression on.
David, open the door.
And part of that meant David had to endure the occasional drunken beating. The movie cut that part out, which might be easier to take, but it does eliminate some of the emotional depth of David's character. We got to see the full horror of what he had to endure since he was 5, which made David and the morally great choices he has to make later in the story much more sympathetic. David isn't really faced with those same choices in the movie, so the movie including this just amounts to a step-by-step copy of the book. Then again, the movie does have a much tamer intro because it also cut the attempted rape scene. Yeah, as soon as David realizes he can teleport, he knows he has no reason to stay with his father. But being a naive teenager, he just starts backpacking across the country when he meets someone who he believes is a well-meaning truck driver willing to give him a lift. Turns out the driver was a rapist, and David narrowly escaped an ambush thanks to his teleportation powers. Although David is sexually assaulted in the process, so yeah. Consider that a warning for those of you who choose to read the book after this. David eventually finds his way to New York, where he rents a room in a sleazy hotel.
I'd like a room.
You're not gonna be any trouble, are you? No weird stuff?
Nope.
But he needs to find a way to pay for it, so he does what most of us would do with teleportation powers. He robs a bank.
I was 15. Come on, what would you have done?
For those of you who are thinking of sneaking into the girls' locker room, go stand in the corner.
I'm gonna need a bigger bag.
The plan works well enough, and David makes himself an overnight millionaire. And at this point, we can forget the rest of the book because the movie jumps right off the fucking rails. The rest of the movie makes several hard changes from the book, adding new characters, changing the organization hunting David, and even altering how his powers work.
When you take a book and turn it into a movie, I'm really someone who believes in throwing the whole thing out and reinventing it as a movie.
The only good thing about these changes is that the main antagonist is played by Samuel L. Jackson.
This guy single-handedly ruined the word motherfucker. Do you know how hard that is to do?
David's robbery attracts the attention of some less than savory characters.
The police and the FBI have already been through here. Who are you with?
NSA.
Among them is Roland, a man who hunts jumpers in a group known as the Paladins.
What's a paladin?
No, not that kind of paladin.
There are people with power to change history. It's up to people like me to stop them. It's not something I get paid for, it's not something I get medals for, it's just something I have to do. One day, I hope that you'll do it too.
In the book, David was hunted primarily by the NSA, which the movie does kind of reference briefly. This is not the same thing because Gould was making a point about government overreach in the book, kind of like Will Smith's Enemy of the State. Replacing the NSA with a mystical/religious order removes that message entirely. And if that doesn't disappoint you, then you'll probably be disheartened to learn that Mr. Jackson does not once say the word motherfucker. But at least they gave us an actor who can really deliver a good Bible quote.
And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
8 years go by and David has settled into his new life, occasionally stealing money when he needs it, and traveling the world for fun. And I don't know if the movie intended for this, but movie David really comes off as a selfish jerk compared to book David.
Closer to the river, but as you can see, this flood became more severe about 10 minutes ago. The question now, Pat, is what will happen to these people? It would take a miracle to get to them.
Movie David isn't even bothered by this tragic news, instead focusing on where he'd visit that day. And this is different from book David, who spent his spare time stopping terrorists. I'll get into that aspect later, but by this point in the book, David was weighing the ethical ramifications of committing identity fraud just so he wouldn't have to move back to his abusive father. The morally gray areas he repeatedly struggled with made him a much more fascinating and sympathetic character, as opposed to movie David, who couldn't be bothered to help the lowly proletariats.
Oh no, those poor people. If only there was someone who could help them. I mean, aside from me, I've got surfing.
Eventually, Roland somehow gets a break in his case and finds out where David lives.
You think you're the only superhero in the world? I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative. You think you could go on like this forever? Living like this with no consequences? There are always consequences.
And this scene is why I like to think that this whole movie is just Mace Windu trying to get revenge on Anakin Skywalker. Master Windu? You're alive? Hey, you're not still pissed about that whole tossing you out of a window thing, are you?
Motherfucker.
Jumpers. Kinda hard to jump with 1,000 volts of electricity passing through your brain, huh?
But he's not getting shocked right now. There were a number of limitations David's powers had in the book, so getting shocked like this does seem possible. It never happened in the first book, but there are several sequels this could be drawing from. David manages to escape the fight, though he leaves behind a significant handicap.
Telecommunications. This is Roland. He got away. We have his jump sites.
With a ruthless killer after him, David does what all heroes do in this situation. He tries to reconnect with his childhood sweetheart.
Millie?
Hi. You were gonna leave without saying anything?
Sorry, I didn't see you.
No? Were you just up there staring at me for the past 45 minutes?
David also finds the asshat that nearly got him killed as a kid.
I think you're drunk.
I'm not drunk, okay? I'm cool. I am totally
110% cool.
It's like 2 in the afternoon.
Why don't you go find a bench and sleep it off, okay?
Why don't you? You'll make me a drink, sweetheart, huh? A little splash of that.
David and Asshat fight, which ends the only way it could, with David teleporting Asshat into a bank vault. Though it should be noted that they landed differently from how they launched. I would question the physics here, but that would be idiotic. Now in the book, Millie wasn't an old friend. She was a college girl that David met in New York and started awkwardly hitting on. This led to David finding out where she lived and watching her from outside her window. Careful, buddy, your inner Edward is showing. But contrasting that with the movie version, I gotta say, the movie made it a little better. It comes off a little smoother, and a little less creepily, even if it is a little overused. David going back to meet the girl next door again comes off as a little easier to believe, his timing within the plot notwithstanding. In the book, he was an awkward high school dropout bank robber with supernatural powers, and it felt more like he was trying to buy Millie's affection since he had little experience with women. It's about as uncomfortable as you think. David walks back in from the fight, and he and Millie start hitting it off immediately.
Was, thinking of maybe checking out Rome, actually.
You were thinking of checking out Rome? Come on, you know that was my dream. Don't try to rip me off, okay?
But this is, of course, David's sly way of asking Millie out.
So come with me.
Okay, stop. She hasn't seen this guy in almost a decade, and she actually goes with him to a foreign country? What's with these magnificent first dates that I keep seeing? Between this guy and Christian Grey, I think I need to restructure my dating life. So Millie joins David in Rome, home of spaghetti, the Mario Brothers, and doing this with your hands.
Hey!
One thing I love about this scene is how the movie completely cut out David's lack of identification. How did he get a passport when he left home at 15 with no driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, or anything? The movie takes all these interesting personal conflicts that David had to overcome on his own and tosses them out to make room for a dumb generic action movie. Millie seems a little on guard, which makes sense for someone who just left the country with a person they haven't seen in 8 years.
Usually in my life when things seem too good to be true, it's because they are.
Then why did you get on a plane with him? Regardless, Millie follows David around for a not quite legal tour of the Colosseum when David meets Griffin, another jumper.
Wouldn't open that door if I were you. Not if I wanted my girlfriend to keep breathing, I wouldn't. But that's just me. What are you gonna do anyway? You're gonna bring her down and have a nice little romantic picnic? Nice little tea party? Is that what you think's gonna happen?
You so much as look at her.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You're gonna jump me where? Did you think you were the only one?
Well, yes, because in the first book, he is the only one. Within the context of the book series, Griffin doesn't exist. Sure, Gould did eventually write a book about Griffin based on this character from the movie called Jumper, Griffin's story, but it's non-canonical. Good job keeping the title simple, though. I do like Griffin, his quick wit and murderous attitude, but once again, this detracts from the focus of the original story, that being David's moral conflicts and the NSA's abuse of power. It shifts the movie to just a simple action movie and requires much less thought put into it than the book. Of course, the real problem here is in how Griffin discovered that David could jump. In the book, David was careful, using his powers out of sight and telling no one about them outside of Millie. He eventually gets caught, but that was because of some NSA agents who were just really good at their jobs. In the movie, he just uses it openly and blatantly to get through a crowd.
Watch it. You mind if I join you?
How secret does he really believe this is? Griffin couldn't have been the only one to notice that. David can't tell anyone about it because that would blow his bank robbing scheme, and yet he's so reckless about it that I'm surprised this hasn't made the rounds on early internet forums or tabloids.
Beware the teleporting man. He'll warp into your bedroom and steal your underwear.
And then there's another thing they changed from the book.
I just came through your jump scare.
Wait, did you say jump scare or jump scar? The movie made jump scars up just so that David could follow Griffin and eventually so the Paladins can follow them. Of course, this raises even more questions about how badly hidden these powers are, but I'll get to that later. David gets arrested for trespassing in the Colosseum and for suspicion of murder during a brief fight scene. It looks like he's in trouble with the local authorities when a guardian angel breaks him out.
Hello, David. You've only got about 30 seconds before they come through that door. Do you understand? You have to get out of here. Ditch the girl. If she's with you, she's dead.
Mom! Mom!
20 seconds, David.
And one of the biggest and most tragic changes they made from the book was what happened to David's mother. See, the movie made her a Paladin. David teleported once when he was 5, somehow forgot about it, and she realized that she would need to murder her own son if she stayed. So she left. Her son's a demon spawn that she's sworn to destroy, but that's okay. I guess a little hypocrisy isn't out of order with the Paladins. More on that later. But this completely reinvents her from the book, which was David's biggest driving action, more so than Millie being abducted by the NSA. In the book, David had to spend months tracking down where his mother went. Again, she left when he was 5, not because he was teleporting, but because she couldn't endure being around her abusive husband anymore. So, she left. She rebuilt her life, got a new job, but didn't try to contact David out of shame for leaving him behind. But he forgave her, they reconnected, and he got to show her a fun time in New York with all the money he now had. She was happy knowing that her son was doing well. And then, she was murdered. Remember when I said David started hunting terrorists? Well, that's because his mother was on a hijacked plane, had a bomb strapped to her, and was used as a decoy so the terrorists could escape. Her bomb exploded on the tarmac as she was running away from the grounded plane. This drove David crazy, so much so that he single-handedly undertook a mission to find the monster that murdered his mother and stop it from ever killing again. Every time there was a plane hijacking somewhere in the world, David would teleport in, warp the terrorists away, then vanish like a superhero. All he was missing was the uniform and cape. But instead of that emotionally gripping and surprisingly fierce storytelling, the movie gives us My Mother the Hypocrite. There's dropping the ball, then there's intentionally lobbing it down a chasm. Millie eventually returns to the US, while David seeks out Griffin for advice on how to deal with Roland.
I was thinking that if we do this together, we could get him.
What do you mean, like you and me?
Yeah.
Like we team up?
Yeah.
Look, I'm sorry, but I don't play well with others.
Griffin is reluctant to join forces, but David keeps following him and eventually badgers him into compliance. But for all the crap I've given David, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out all of Griffin's stupidity with his powers.
Sorry, clutch stuck.
At this point, the movie might as well establish that every city on Earth is actually Metropolis and no one can see the obvious.
So how long you been doing this for?
Doing what? Driving?
No, jumping.
Since I was 5.
5?
Yep.
How'd you keep it a secret from people?
That's what I want to know! I know I keep coming back to the powers being the world's worst kept secret, but the jumpers obviously need to keep it hidden. They know they need to keep it hidden, but they show an overwhelming amount of disregard towards doing it. It all goes towards consistent storytelling. You're telling me that no one in the general public has ever documented or recorded these powers? God, the more I think about it, the angrier I get! David goes back for Millie, just before Roland and his thugs get there, but he has to teleport out to Griffin's cave to save her.
This might hurt a little bit, okay?
But this turns out to be a tremendous mistake.
What is this?
David?
What's she doing here? This isn't some kind of clubhouse, you know.
What's going on?
Millie, I told you to
see
stay
top of Mount
inside.
Everest.
That's what I was trying to tell you, okay?
Maybe the bottom, I don't know, it's up to you.
What?
Griffin, listen to me, all right? That's what I was trying to tell you, okay?
By bringing her down here, they can follow you. They have a machine. Can open wormholes and keep them open.
What are you talking about?
I'm saying they can follow us anywhere.
So the jumpers aren't allowed to teleport, but the Paladins are? Just so they can murder people? Religious hypocrisy at its finest! Since they're prepared, Roland and company warp through the jump scar and easily capture David. Roland explains that he wants to murder jumpers because
sooner or later you all go bad.
What if I'm different?
You rob banks.
You're not different.
I'm different!
Now, I may have given this movie a lot of crap, but I do like some of these fight scenes. Like this bit.
It's time to send you home to mommy.
Not only is Griffin jumping constantly to avoid Roland's attacks, but he's building up momentum for a stronger attack. It's a clever moment in an otherwise stupid movie. The fight scene ends with Griffin stealing the Paladin's tech and Roland kidnapping Millie. Griffin pulls out a bomb to kill Roland and his gang, but David wants to go back and save Millie first.
Griffin, it's my fault that she's there, are you?
What?
We gotta get her out of there, right? We have to get her out of there!
I can hear you! I'm not deaf. I understand what you're saying. I can actually hear.
All right.
It's a crying shame. It really is. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices once in a while.
They disagree on tactics, so this leads to a fight scene between the two jumpers, in a scene that couldn't not blow the lid on jumping. Well, that does it! This has officially muddied the story enough that the sequel, if they ever made one, would be how centuries of secret powers were undone by these two children having a hissy fit against each other.
Paladins have been killing jumpers for years. Way back since medieval times.
And all of that secrecy, the centuries of hiding by the jumpers, all of that gets done away with in minutes by this. Throughout the movie, David shows no regard for keeping his powers secret, which is one of the dumbest changes from the book. Book David studied his powers, tested them out, and only teleported to dark corners or rooms that were out of the way. Movie David couldn't be bothered and just does what's convenient, which not only puts him at risk, but just as importantly puts every other jumper in the world at risk. Because if they're no longer hidden, then the Paladins information network spreads. The fight takes David and Griffin all over, from public streets, to public sidewalks, to public pools, and somehow, David survives this. Despite the fact that his body should be at least 3 different states of liquid, David tricks Griffin into a set of power lines, which should absolutely kill him.
The old electricity trick. That's a nice move. Thanks.
So David, being the biggest idiot in this movie, goes to save Millie and stumbles into the most obvious trap ever. And then this is where the movie really loses the plot. Despite having multiple electrical prongs in him which disable his powers, David is still able to latch onto the building and tries to jump with it.
Some things you can't jump, David!
And then, against all reason, logic, and established canon, David jumps the entire apartment and everyone in it. See, there's a scene we skipped over earlier where David and Griffin were getting to know each other a little better.
Not bad. This thing must be 2 tons easy. How are you,
If it moves, I can jump it. Actually, I knew this jumper once. Crazy bastard. Try to hop a whole building. Won't be trying that again.
What's that?
That's because he's dead. Killed him. Still managed to shake it a little though.
David has had a few years to master his powers, but a few hours ago he was impressed that Griffin could teleport a car. Now you're telling me that it can teleport a building? And it can do it while getting shocked by multiple stun rods. A few minutes ago he couldn't teleport himself when he was trapped by a single net, but now it can do the impossible? How? And to add insult to injury, David warps back to the library, ruining more books than ever before. Okay, if I ever meet this guy in real life, I get stabbing rights! Roland is still along for the ride, somehow, until David teleports him to some isolated cave in a canyon.
I told you I'm different. Could have dropped you with the sharks.
And you're an idiot for not doing that. He's a religious fanatic, he's going to come after you again. Millie forgives David in the end, but there's still the matter of David's mother. David manages to track her down, where he meets...
Can I help you?
Open fire! I like to think that this movie had potential, but they easily lost that only a few days into writing the script. The special effects are generally good, and some of the technicals aren't bad, but there are multiple inconsistencies within the plot, the action is surprisingly listless, and the characters are horrible. David and Griffin just do whatever the hell they want, with complete disregard for anyone around them. Griffin even crashes a double-decker bus to crush Roland in one scene, then teleports some poor guy in a beat-up pickup truck into the middle of a battle in Chechnya. David thinks that rules don't apply to him, and God only knows how many lives he's ruined from all those bank robberies. Maybe Roland really is the good guy of the movie. It gets a 2 out of 5. David in the book is young and naive, but he does the best he can in a bad series of situations. There is some bumbling around, like when he meets Millie, but he does come off as very likable and very selfless. Besides, it's really easy to side with David when he starts fighting the NSA, whose members become willing to violate a few civil liberties when chasing him down. The prose is pretty slow and straightforward, but it does help us get into David's head with the first-person narration and see things from his point of view, again helping us see him in a sympathetic light. The book is worth the read just to see what choices he makes with these new powers. The book gets a 4 out of 5. The book is so different from the movie that if the studio just changed a few names, they wouldn't have to pay any royalties to the author. The world was wrong, the antagonists were wrong, the plot was wrong, and worst of all, the characters were way off the mark. I had seen the movie years before and thought it was mediocre as an action movie, but the book really threw me off with the slower pacing and competent characters. What I want to know is, why use this name at all if they're going to completely screw up everything about it? This is like adapting Jurassic Park into a kaiju battle movie. Nicely done, guys. You've made it into my top 5 worst adaptations. As an adaptation, Jumper deserves a 1 out of 5. Okay, I think we thoroughly destroyed it.
それは良い殺害だった。そっち雲の死に似てる。
Wait, what?
Say what again? Say what again? I double dare you, motherfucker!
Right. Hey, let's just go get food. How's pizza sound?
Ooh, I do like pizza.